There's some weeks where we get to Friday and, yeah, I mean, I always talk about how Friday is my favorite day of the week, favorite, morning pit to do, the mailbag. It's always fun to put this together. But there's some weeks when you get to Friday, and I kind of think back over the previous week of like morning pit episodes, and I typically like write down, I have a little schedule, like, oh, I'm going to talk about this and this and this and this, and sometimes the schedule actually sticks. Like, I try to plan it out Monday through Friday, what we're going to talk about each day. And sometimes it sticks to that schedule. Sometimes, best case scenario, news comes up and we can kind of shelve some of the pre-planned topics and talk about news that happens. Like, when Sean Lee committed, or the Corey Sanders news with the assistant head coach position, we can come up with different topics to talk about better than just what I planned out on Sunday or Monday. And so sometimes I get to the end of the week and I look at what our episodes were and what we've talked about, and I'm like, probably could have done a little better, or that was good stuff. That was fun. Not that I get too much in praise of our own work here, but sometimes I look back and I'm like, I think we hit on some interesting topics this week, and I do kind of feel like we hit on some interesting stuff this week. I think we talked a lot about recruiting. I think it was important to talk about Corey Sanders and kind of his role in the coaching staff. Obviously yesterday talking about a commitment, and and then previewing the official visits that are happening right now. I mean, there were some interesting topics to discuss, and I think we really went deep on a lot of things, and it was fun. It's been a fun week here on the Morning Pit, and I'm excited to close it out here with the mailbag, as we always do on Friday. We got great questions already, a lot of recruiting stuff, some recruiting strategy stuff, some offensive questions. I'm going to try and get as many questions as we can, the leftover questions from last week and then the questions from this week. I'm going to try and get them all without going like a half hour here. I'm going to try and fit them all into that 20 to 22 minute mark or so. So let's jump into it. Enough with the rambling preamble, the pre-ramble, I guess you would call it, or you probably wouldn't, because not all of us can be dorks who say things like pre-ramble. But anyway, enough of the pre-ramble. Let's jump into it. The Friday edition of the Morning Pit, the Morning Pit Mailbag, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Okay, I really don't want to waste much time. So look, let's just skip over everything. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. All these questions that we answer every week in the mailbag, they come from the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And I'm not just picking out questions that somebody says in a random thread. We put up a thread every Tuesday or Wednesday calling for questions for the mailbag, and people reply and post their questions. And then we answer as many as we can right here in the mailbag. So if you want to ask a question for the mailbag, you got to be a premium subscriber to Panther-Lair.com, in addition to getting all of the Pitt sports info that you're going to get by being a subscriber. All the football, basketball, recruiting info, it's all right there at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, the message boards where you can interact with other Pitt fans all day, every day. Let's jump into it. Question from last week, RM250 RACR4, the longest collection of letters and numbers in a message board username, at least on Panther-Lair.com, as far as I'm aware of. Says, the last few years has been a grind to get offensive players to commit. Do you think this younger coaching staff pitching a more open offense is making a big difference, or is it just getting them on campus at the right time? That's an interesting question. Look, I think since Pat Narduzzi got here, it's been a bit of a grind to get offensive guys. I think clearly, if you look over the course of the last 9 years, 10 years, the recruiting's been better on defense than it's been on offense. I think the results of that have played out on the field. They've played out in terms of draft picks. They've played out just in where the strength of the team is. And it comes from having the defensive head coach and probably having a better staff on the defensive side. I think you look at where the better recruiters have been on this coaching staff, they've been on defense. I think when you look at some of where the better coaches have been on this coaching staff, they've been on defense. Maybe the opportunity to capitalize on offense was after that 2021 season, but whatever you might want to say about Mark Whipple and how could I draw Brennan Marion? Those were two guys who were directly attached to the two Pitt offensive players who had the most success. So even if you were replacing those players, you could at least sell it on having those coaches. And Frank Cignetti's not Mark Whipple. Taekwon Underwood's not Brennan Marion. And so you weren't able to really sell that success and maybe not capitalize, at least in terms of the offensive recruits, as much as you should have been able to capitalize on having a quarterback be a Heisman Trophy finalist and a wide receiver be the Biletnikoff Award winner. You should be able to capitalize on that, but when you have the coaching staff turnover, you sort of miss your opportunity. And so I don't really feel like there's been a time when they've capitalized on offensive recruiting all that much, for a variety of reasons. So and like I say, I think there are a number of reasons of why that's the case. Is it changing now? I don't know. They have a 4-star offensive lineman coming in this weekend. But I think when you look at the guys they're getting, they sort of follow the mold of some of the transfers they brought in terms of the offensive skill guys. And so we'll see how they translate. They're fast, right? They're definitely getting speed. And the coaches are trying to, as you say, sort of pitch a new offense, a wide open offense, an offense that's going to throw the ball a lot and score a lot of points and go fast, play fast, score faster, and all that stuff. Okay, like there's all that at play, but I don't know if we've seen it resonate. I mean, they're going to need on-field success, and I think maybe part of the reason some of the recruiting is as it has been this year is you have a whole new offensive coaching staff. So you're starting over with a lot of guys. You're building new relationships with a lot of recruits, and some of them might be in wait-and-see mode. After you went 3-9 last year with a putrid offense and terrible quarterback play, some of them might be in wait-and-see mode. Not only are they waiting to build relationships with the new offensive coaches, but they're waiting to see if your offense is actually going to work. And so maybe there'll be more offensive recruiting success next year, but you're just kind of selling promise and hope right now, and I don't know if that sells quite as well. It's one thing to sell that when you have a whole new coaching staff and you're completely starting over. It's a brand new head coach. You can sell the promise of a greater tomorrow. It's a little bit tougher when you only, you've changed over half your coaching staff and, brought in a lot of guys who haven't necessarily had the success at this level yet. So I think there's a little bit of a wait and see there. This is an interesting question. I don't have a great answer for this, but I like this question. I think it's interesting. From Mattwood 409. Is this class going to be more important than most people think it will be? It seems like there will be more structure with NIL and revenue sharing in the next 2 years. I feel like there's a possibility that this class will be more of a return to similar classes prior to COVID and NIL, where most of the players will graduate from Pitt or transfer down. He says also, I want you to know that I listen to every Morning Pitt in my car on Spotify, and using YouTube is just not feasible during my commute. I feel personally shamed every time you mention listening to it on YouTube. I'm trying. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your efforts, and you're already a subscriber to the website, so it's okay. You're listening to it on Spotify. We appreciate that you're tuning in for it, and hope that someday YouTube makes it a little more feasible for you. But so that's really interesting about the recruiting class, and I hadn't really thought about that. Even though we've talked so much about how revenue sharing and maybe getting some structure around NIL could potentially stabilize things a little bit, I hadn't thought about how that might trickle down to the impact on or importance of the current recruiting class, like last year's class, this year's class, next year's class. Because if there is some stabilization in college sports, if maybe the transfer portal calms down a little bit because NIL gets some structure to it and it's not quite as much of free agency as it has been, then yeah, there is some significance, some importance on a class that potentially is going to be around for a while. And I think that's interesting, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I'm probably not going to stress too much over it right now, but yeah, potentially these guys could be a class that more of them stick around for the long term than those that don't. Pitt has had some classes get kind of decimated by the transfer portal, either by guys that weren't playing or guys who were, playing well. But those numbers could go down with a class of guys that's going to stick around longer. And like I say, if there's more structure around NIL, you could see those transfer numbers drop, which means you better have gotten it right in recruiting. And for Pitt, it's always been important to get it right. You have to get it right in recruiting because you are recruiting sort of long-term projects. And I don't mean project in sort of that pejorative term. I mean guys that you're going to build up over the years. And so you've always needed to get it right in recruiting for a lot of schools, obviously, but certainly for Pitt. but there might be a little bit more significance, particularly if you end up in a few years in some sort of collectively bargained situation where you have players under contract, and it's just as hard for you to get out of the contract as it is for them. I mean, yeah, you really better get it right in recruiting. Rhombus58 says, how do you think Desmond Reed and Derek Davis will be used in the new offense, giving Hammond a break as pass catchers, a little bit of everything? Do you think we'll see any two-back formations? I don't know Cade Bell's offense well enough to know if he used two-back formations at Western Carolina. I'm just as curious as you are about Desmond Reed and Derek Davis. I'm really intrigued by Reed. I'm really curious about Davis. I just don't know what their roles are going to be. I think Rodney Hammond's the number one back. I think he should be the number one back. I've said that I feel like you'll get less substitutions during a drive because of the tempo they're going to play at. So I think you'll see fewer guys coming in and out during a drive, but it could be every other drive. You know what I mean? If it's an extended drive, 6, 7, 8, 9 plays, it could be Rodney Hammond, and then the next drive could be Desmond Reed. Unless they want to find different roles for those guys, putting him in the slot or having him catch passes, maybe two-back formations like you say. I think those are the top three backs, probably in that order: Hammond, Reed, Davis. Davis potentially could have some home run hitter ability to him. I think Reed potentially could have some home run hitter ability to him as well. And so you'd like to mix that element in, and maybe the best way to do it is to have two back formations. But with the emphasis on getting Gavin Bartholomew the ball, with the receivers that they've got that they're going to want to have out there, I don't know how often they're going to go with two backs. But I do think Reed and Davis will play a lot. Because if they keep up this tempo, they're going to need guys to be able to rest. And, Rodney Hammond isn't going to play 3 series in a row at this tempo. And so you're going to need those guys out there. How much it turns into in terms of playing time, snaps, and touches, I don't know. We'll have to see. Smenja says, what should we expect in the red zone offense? Any Wildcat quarterback possibilities on the roster? Tall end zone targets? No. Like in terms of tall end zone target, I mean, like there aren't really big receivers. You know what I mean? This is going to be scheming guys open to get quick throws to Konate Mumfield in the end zone, or quick throws to get Gavin Bartholomew. I don't know if he's much of an end zone target. Running backs on wheel routes, maybe going out to the flat or something. I don't know. I don't think you have an obvious big target to throw to, a Lucas Krull or even a Bub Means. I think you're going to be counting on Kenny Johnson, Konate Mumfield, Dejon Reynolds winning one-on-one battles, and then Raphael Williams and CJ Lee getting schemed open, right? Something that Cade Bell has talked about, and a lot of the Pitt coaches and players have talked about, scheming guys open. And I think you're going to be relying on that in to get down the field and then to in the red zone. It'll be interesting to see if this team is able to strike from a distance more than previous teams, either through the design of the offense or the types of players. I mean, Desmond Reed has that speed, right? Derek Davis has that speed. Williams and Lee, the two transfers, I mean, they're fast receivers. They should be able to get downfield and get open for plays, to make plays downfield. And so maybe this offense will be able to strike. There always used to be a joke that for Walt Harris felt like he was in the red zone once they got inside the 40. Some coaches call that the gold zone or something like that. For Walt Harris, once he was inside the 40, it was the red zone. It was touchdown or bust once he got to that point. And, he had a lot of ways to go at it, and he had a lot of ways to try and attack and get to the end zone from there. But I wonder if this offense might have similar big play, quick strike ambitions. And potentially capabilities. We'll find out. We'll see. All right, next question. Like these questions a lot. Potter County native says, with our commitments sitting at 13, how many do you really expect to see signed with Pitt next year at this time? Over under 11.5? So that's something we've talked about a lot of times. We've talked about if you have X number of June commitments, you probably can subtract 2 or 3 that are going to decommit along the way. I mean, we've seen this every year since they started the June official visits, that they've gotten guys and then they've lost guys. And there were guys on that first official visit weekend way back in June 2018, as well as there were guys on June official visit weekends last year that they visit in June, they commit in June, and then they end up flipping to another school, either later in the summer, like Henry Parrish, through the fall, like, what was his name last year? I'm drawing a blank. Wasn't Shelton Lewis, because he decommitted like a week after committing to Pitt. It was the other guy, Bryce Pollock, who went to Mississippi State, or Kenny Minchie, who went to Notre Dame. And then some guys in December, they end up taking another official visit or two, like that first year, that 2019 recruiting class. Kadri Jackson and, flips to Notre Dame, North Carolina right before signing day. Brandon Mack ends up flipping and going to Ole Miss in January or February. So you're going to have some. You're going to have some guys who decommit. You're going to have some guys who flip. And as I sit here and look at the list of 13 currently, there's nobody that jumps out. There's nobody that's like, well, this guy, this is the flip candidate. You know what I mean? Whereas that receiver last year, Rick Darius Farmer, Day Farmer, who committed on like Christmas Day 2022, I guess it was, ended up flipping to West Virginia, but he might have signed with UCF, or maybe it was vice versa. It doesn't matter. But I mean, you kind of had a sense with him from the start, like, yeah, I would put the odds below 50% that they're going to end up signing this kid. I don't know if there's anybody who jumps off the page right now from the current list of commitments of guys that will not make it, but there's going to be 2 or 3. I think it's just inevitable. So over under 11.5 out of the current 13, I would say under. End up signing with Pitt. Again, not because of any inside intel or info or, boy, I'm hearing about this guy. No, it's just you got to play the odds here. And I think there's a certain amount of expected attrition. All right, PGH Sun J 1325 has a very long question here, but he says I don't have to read it all. It says, what exactly is Pitt's personnel strategy going forward? Are they content to take small classes and try to utilize the portal more? In the era of player freedom of movement, why does it seem like Pat Narduzzi insists on keeping classes smaller rather than ensuring that they have enough volume to find the talent they need if they cannot get/afford the top tier? And it says you can end the question there for mailbag purposes, as I'm going to rant here for a minute. And goes on and talks about the Pirates and this and that, and why are they not recruiting 25 kids per class to take homegrown swings if they're mostly going to get 3-star talent? Can you try to give some insight on why he isn't adapting to signing bigger classes? Well, I think there's a couple of things at play here. Primarily, it's the COVID year. The last few classes have been impacted by the super seniors who spent an extra year on the roster. And the biggest impact, it was the 2022 recruiting class, which is the class they were signing, during the year 2021 when guys were coming back for a 6th year. And they ended up signing 13 guys in that recruiting class. I think they had limited space available. They did take some transfers that year. Bob Means, Keaton Slovis, etc. Kanate Mumfield. They got some transfers, but they took a smaller class, I think, because they had fewer scholarship spots available due to the COVID extra year. If you roll the clock back, 2016 class, they signed 24. 17, they signed 24. 18, they signed 20. And the numbers do go down. 19, they signed 19. 20, they signed 18. So you get a little bit of a dip there, but that's sort of the traditional historic cycle of recruiting classes, that you're going to have a couple classes in a row that are going to be a little bigger. So they signed 24, 24, and 20, 2016, 17, 18. But then your numbers are going to dip a little bit because those classes are going to take up a bulk of your scholarships. And so you're going to have smaller graduating senior classes. You're going to take fewer guys to fill those spots. So they signed 19 recruits in 2019. They signed 18 in 2020. But then the next year, the 2021 recruiting class, when they didn't have the COVID seniors, the super seniors to deal with yet, for the recruiting class of 2021, they signed 23 guys. Still a pretty sizable class. Now the numbers dip. 2022, they signed 13 guys. But then they start climbing. 2023 recruiting class, they signed 19. This past year, the kids coming in right now, they signed 21. So you're seeing a trend going back up. As those super seniors are coming down, you're seeing the numbers go back up, in addition to signing more transfers each year. So they're adding more parts to the roster. They're adding more players. I don't know if you'll see, well, I was going to say I don't know if you'll see like a trend of 25 kids every year, 25 high school recruits every year, because a certain amount of your new scholarships are going to go to transfers you're bringing in, guys who will help you right now, or guys you intend to have help you, come in and help right away. But at the same time, you're also going to have more attrition. You're going to have more transfers leaving. You're going to have more guys that you nudge out the door or they find other opportunities. So in addition to your seniors, and you're going to have a certain amount of seniors who graduate every year and open up scholarship spots. You're also going to have transfers that are leaving. Now, maybe your senior classes are smaller because other guys have already transferred before they get there. There's a lot of moving parts with the numbers, and we're very much in a transition period in college sports with the sixth-year super seniors adding into the advent of the transfer portal, guys leaving, guys coming in. Numbers are changing and shifting. I don't think I'm looking at it as Panaruzzi's intent on signing smaller classes. That hasn't been historically the case, except for when he was returning a lot of seniors. Now, as we've said, I mean, those numbers of seniors, those super seniors who are coming back, is going down and down each year. And I think after this year, you'll be pretty much done with it. There won't be anybody left who's doing that, who's taking that extra year of eligibility. So now you're past that point, that sort of unaccounted for guys who are going to take up scholarship spots on the roster. So you're going to have more spots available for high school kids, but you're also going to have those spots available for transfers as well. I don't think, so I understand what you're saying, take 25 kids, hope you find some diamonds in the rough. Okay. I think I see him I think Pitt will continue with the recruiting strategy they had pre-COVID of signing the kids they can signing 19 to 24 kids every year, and then filling in spots with transfers. Now, if you end up with, more spots available because you've had a lot of guys transfer, you'll build up the recruiting classes, and you'll also take more transfers. You'll bring in those guys who can help right now. But I don't see a move toward taking smaller classes. If you're thinking about right now, they've got 13 recruits committed. I imagine by the end of this weekend, or maybe let's say by the second week in July, they'll probably be around 17 to 19, which means I can imagine they would end up with about 21 in this class. I don't know the exact target number. I'm not sure there is an exact target number because you don't know how many transfers you're going to lose. You don't know how many transfers you're going to want to bring in. All of those things are going to affect the number of available scholarships. But I would imagine that this recruiting class will be like last year, and they'll sign 21 guys, which I don't think is a small class. I don't think that's an intentionally smaller class. So that's kind of where I see that. I don't think... Like I said, I guess that would be my answers. I don't think they have a personnel strategy of intentionally taking smaller classes. I think you have to consider the impact those super seniors had on the last 3 classes or so, the classes of 21, 22, 23, but you've seen, or not even 21 because they signed 23 guys that year, but the 22, 23 classes, both sub 20, but you've seen those numbers going up over those last 3 classes, 22, 23, 24, and I think this year will be around that area too, 21, 22 guys, plus the transfers they're bringing in. So I guess I'm disagreeing with your premise. But I look forward to having a conversation about it. You can respond in the comments or also on the message board so we can talk about it there. And I was hoping to get all these questions in 22 minutes. We still had another question or two, and we didn't get it done because it's already 23 minutes. So we'll save that question for next week and take lots more questions throughout the week next week for the mailbag. I always enjoy doing this. I think we find some interesting topics. You guys come up with some interesting topics to discuss, and it's always fun to have these conversations. So thanks, everybody who submitted your questions this week. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody who watched the Morning Pit or listen on Spotify throughout the week. Talking to you, Atwood409. Thanks, everybody who checked it out. We appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you've had a great week. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you on Monday morning for all the recruiting recap right here on the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.